Pick Computer Science video number 51, where we look at file handling and file operations. Now, most of the programs that we've coded so far have made use of variables in order to temporarily store data. Those variables could be variables like we see on the screen there, string variables. They could be arrays that hold more than one data item, all of the same data type. But either way, that data is only ever stored temporarily whilst the program is running. The values of the data can change whilst the program is running, but once the program ends, all of those variables are wiped and the data is not kept. So we need to look now a bit more about how data can be kept permanently whilst programming, and files is one way that this can be achieved, such as this text file here. All of that data there may well have been generated by a Visual Basic program and saved into this text file, and then opened again another time that the program is run. So the text file will be opened, data written out to it using Visual Basic, then the file saved and closed, and then the program stopped. Then the program might open again and go to this text file and read from it or add more data to it. So this is a way where we're not just using variables to temporarily store data, but we can use commands to persist data, meaning that data is stored permanently or semi-permanently, because that data of course may change in the future. It's never stored permanently, it could always be deleted if need so. Instead of text files, it's more likely, in business anyway, that relational databases such as Microsoft Access would be used to store data in a more structured way. The VB commands needed to do this are more complicated than the VB commands needed to write to text files and read from text files. But we will come on to those commands needed to do database operations in due course. But for now, we'll just concentrate on the commands needed for text file operations. So what sort of commands exist in VB.NET to be able to open a file, read from a file, write to a file, and close a file? Well, if you pause the screen at this point, you can have a quick look at the top lot of code, which is to open a file, to read from the file, and to close it, and then the second block of code to open a file and to write some text out to the file. Ask your teacher for some exercises whereby you can practice some of those techniques in VB.NET. But what's more important really is to know the key things for an exam. And first of all, how to open, read and close a text file. Here's from the pseudocode guide from the exam board: reading to and writing from files. To open a file to read from, open read is used, and read line to return a line of text from the file. The following programs makes X the first line of sample.txt. So we've got something that says my file equals open read sample.txt. That means that my file is an object in code and is set to basically the contents of sample.txt, wherever that may be. Then we've got a variable X, and that is made equal to the first line of my file, because we're doing X equals my file dot read line, and read line returns a line of text from the file. Once that's done, we will use myfile.close to close the file again, and X would still have that first line of text in there. But there's a pretty simple example from the pseudocode guide of how to open, read from and close a text file. Like I said, that was a very basic example. The more likely that you're going to want to read everything from a text file. So the end of file command is used to determine the end of the file. The following program will print out the contents of sample.txt. So we're doing something very similar to before. We're just setting the object myFile to be the contents of sample.txt, and then what we're saying is while not myFile.end of file, print myFile.readLine end while myFile.close. So it would output each line of the file on screen using the print command there and using some condition controlled iteration. Of course, as well as reading from, we want to write to files. So here we open, write to and close a file. To open a file, to write, open write is used, and write line to add a line of text to the file. In the program below, hello world is made the contents of sample.txt, And note, any previous contents are actually overwritten. So this will not append, will not add to the end of a file, will actually overwrite a file. So if there's already something in sample.txt, it's going to get wiped out. This time we make the object myFile equal to openWrite sample.txt, meaning that the file is opened for writing and not reading. And then we'll do the writeLine method of the myFile object to write out the line hello world to the file before closing it. Bit of extra stuff for you here. The examples we've seen there are all to do with file input and output. Inputting to a file, outputting from a file, but there's also screen input and output as well. We may not have looked at this next section of the pseudocode guide in very much detail, but what it's telling us is that we'd use the print command to output to screen. There's an example there. To take input from a user, we'd make a variable equal to the command input followed by the prompt that we're giving to the user, and there's an example of that there as well. One further thing we haven't talked much about in terms of pseudocode is how to add comments, and that's done with the // so everything after that right parenthesis there would not be executed by the IDE. Right, so next you need to just get some practice on doing some of those file handling operations, and yeah, you need to study the pseudocode guide and make sure you're happy with what some file input and output might look like in an exam question.